Welcome to the Hound Talk podcast. We're here to talk everything hounds, specifically when it comes to big game. Mountain lions, bears, and bobcats. Along with the game we pursue, we're going to talk about the dogs we run and the families behind them. Enjoy some good conversation between houndsmen as we dive into what makes us live this life we live and how it all started. I'm your host, Dustin Clark. This podcast is sponsored by Cold Strike, a houndsman-owned business that was built by a family for families. Now let's get into it. Hey guys, we're back with another episode of the Hound Talk podcast, and today I am joined with Mclain Mecham out of Southern Utah, Tropic Utah, actually. Lifetime lion hunter, been doing it probably for more years than most guys could ever think of. I got lucky enough to get him on the phone tonight. He's not real tech savvy, so it took us a few minutes. But so Mclain, you want to just tell a little backstory on how you got into dogs, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So I kind of grew up in the dogs. My dad, he'd had dogs since he was about 17 years old, I guess. And so, we grew up in it. And, as a young kid, I just ate, drank, and slept dogs. My whole day was, I couldn't wait to get out and get with the dogs. And gosh, he never really let me have my own dog till I was probably about 12 or 13. And, but, it's been a good lifestyle. It's something that, you just gets in your blood and you can't get it out.
Oh, definitely. I understand that. I got into them. I think I was 19 when I got my first one. And it's like you say, it gets into your blood. And obviously it's been a family thing for you guys because Hunter's been going with you or your dad ever since probably before he could even walk, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be pretty close. and he's already got his boy, and Emery, Ty and Emery have both been to trees.
I packed them both.
I know. I've seen that. Yeah, hell, at one of the trees, you was there on crutches.
I was. Luckily, it was pretty close to the road. But nothing better than, it's always fun to see your kids to the first tree, but to be able to take your grandkids is even better, And we caught the line that Emery seen in July, and gosh, me and Merrill Lee packed her, and I tell you, it was only about a mile into the tree, but I tell you, I was give out. I think she was naked by the time we got out of there. Saw it, but nothing better than to see them, get to experience that first tree. They probably didn't know what was really going on, but
Yeah.
it's always fun to be able to say you got them there.
Oh, definitely. I can remember the first tree that I got Chloe to was with Hunter. We were camped up on the summer pursuit, me and Hunter and a bunch of friends, and we had even old oh, dang it, I knew his name until I wanted to think about it. The guy that had the house just down from the farm.
Dale.
Yes. Yeah, he was with us. So we got him to a tree that day too. But yeah, that was Chloe's first tree. I had her on my back. So
nothing better.
No, definitely.
I think Hunter was probably 2 or 3 maybe before I got him to his first one. Then it just a little older, we was able to get him on the mule, and Dad got him to another tree. I walked, but I think after that day it ruined him. It's you either have it or you don't.
Yep.
Especially with these hounds, and like my brother, his boys, I don't know, he probably ruined them, on too many, long cold days, and they just didn't take to it like Hunter did. But
yep.
It's not for everybody.
No, it's not. It's definitely it's not a hobby. It can be for some guys, but especially for the way that you guys do it. It's just life, a way of life, not a hobby.
Yeah.
It's just too much time and too much effort and things that go into it, for sure.
Yeah. It takes a lot of time. You spend a lot of time, just making good dogs. You just they don't learn anything when they're on the chain.
That's exactly
So it's
right.
constantly getting them out, and the cost of everything, and especially when you got a family, it interferes with your family life quite a bit too. And I was blessed with a wife that let me do what I loved for a
Yep.
long time,
Yeah, that
and
makes a
and
big
supported
difference.
me. So yep.
Definitely. She's a good woman. She's taken care of me a time or two. So um so before we get too far into it, I know where the lines come from, but what kind of give us a backstory on the line of dogs that, your dad has and what you're running today.
So my dad started out with, I think, like some I think he had a black and tan. Nothing was really. They were just dogs he picked up, but he kind of got into the Charlie Tant dogs, which were Walker dogs, and they were good fast dogs. Then he just started crossing in with some of these old timers from around here, like Bert Emmett,
Hmm.
Leon Cox. Oh,
Did he cross with was it Jack Butler too?
Jack Butler. Yeah, he got a couple of dogs from Jack Butler.
Okay.
So some of that line runs in our dogs, and they, he was that got to meet uh, Jack Butler. He was over here hunting years ago, and got to spend a little time. And I believe old Jack had some really good dogs, but old Bert Emmett had some exceptional dogs, and so did Leon Cox and old Wiley Carroll.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yep.
He was kind of a government trapper, but he had a lot of kind of some English red tick dogs. And so, anyway, over the years, we've kind of just bred these dogs uh, for the better noses, and we've made a lot of crosses over the years. And, you can breed the best of the best, and you're not always going to get the best.
Yep.
Um, and my dad bred them really tight for a lot of years. And we got the good noses, but we lost a little bit of that treeing instinct in some of them dogs. And but the last several years, Clint Clint and I had a male dog, and Clint had a little female dog, and it was just one of them crosses that they kind of all worked. They
Yep.
and we just kept kind of going that direction, and you have to outcross every once in a while, but out of a litter of puppies, and this, we'll get one every color.
Oh yeah.
They're no registered dogs that we have or paper dogs, but dad got a dog years ago. He called him Moke. He was half bloodhound, had a little red bone in him and something else, and which was an exceptional dog. And we got a few pretty good dogs out of him. But the last few years, Hunter and I have been making a cross here, and these dogs are exceptional. They're
Yeah.
got everything you want in a dog. Um, Good noses, pretty good tree dogs, and they just got a pile of go to them.
Yeah,
A lot of heart.
definitely. One thing I had some guys asking me the other day, because if people don't know, every dog that I run or own comes from you guys, but they were asking me on the difference with certain lions being able to transition from running a dirt lion one day to a bear the next and right back to a dirt lion. And from my experience, like hunting with you guys, your guys' dogs transition that very well for the most part. They don't it it doesn't take them long to run a bear and turn around and slow down and go to cold trail and a lion the next day.
No, they do. They do a pretty good job that way. And I kind of got out of the bears here. And Hunter, he likes that bear hunting, but I've had a couple of these good old lion dogs get hurt, and it's a little tougher to make a good lion dog than a bear
Yes.
dog. Them bear dogs are a dime a dozen. But um, so yeah, these dogs, mainly Hunter's dogs right now, he can run a bear one day, and we'll turn around and put him right on the line. In fact, this happened the other day. I had a line hunter in and a couple of days ago. Well, it was last week, I guess, and he had walked a canyon and hit a bear. But anyway, he toned him off the bear. Come back where I was on the lion, and we stuck him right to that lion, and they sit and pounded that lion all day long till dark. We never
Yep.
did catch up to him, um, but yeah, they transition pretty good.
Yeah, and that's I get that question quite a bit just because a few people that I talk to know that I run dogs from you guys, and they've always asked like what I thought one of the better traits out of them dogs was besides their nose and just their ability was that they transition well and they don't because some lines you'll go run a few bears and it'll take them 2 or 3 lions to really kind of slow down
Yeah,
and buckle back down to that cold trail where I don't see that as much in some of the dogs. Some of them young dogs, it definitely takes them a minute, but them them good old dogs, like like a couple of hunters like Saber or Quake, they transition pretty dang easy.
yeah. And when you're hunting them bears, and we hunt lions different than most people do anyway. And I like to get on the mule and just go ride.
Yep,
But you take a lot of these dogs, these bear dogs, and you're kicking them on a hot track every day,
yep,
and so you pull over to put on a lion, and they're running crazy for a while,
yep,
just
yep,
and it just takes them a while to settle down. And I know one winter we had quite a bit of snow, and we were snowmobiling that year, which we don't do much of. And I know them dogs of mine come spring, every time you dumped them out of the truck, they thought there was a track there and they should be flying. They
yep,
run around like idiots for 20 minutes before they settle down and go to trailing. And that's the way them, after running bears all the time, it takes them dogs a little while
yep.
to settle down and
Yeah,
get back cold trailing.
yeah. They get a little wound tight, especially coming out of the truck for sure.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. Most
um,
time they get turned loose, they know there's something there.
yeah, yeah, definitely. No, and that's like I running dogs before I got to meet Hunter and got to meet you. That's how I was just finding snow tracks and kicking dogs out and running bears until I got to hunt with you guys and learn a whole different way and I was ruined after that.
Yeah. There's one thing about it: you can unload the mule and head through a lot of country that a lot of people aren't going to be able to cut on the road. So,
Yep, definitely.
and you know me, I don't get up at 2 or 3 in the morning and go cut tracks. I get up when the sun comes up and go
Oh,
hunt.
yep. I can recount many phone calls when you asked me what I was doing. I told you I'd cut lion tracks at 4 in the morning and been hiking all day, and all I got was, "What the hell are you doing that for?" So, so with with the dogs that your dad used to run and when you first got into it and the dogs now, you say, that the dogs you're running today are probably better than the dogs you had, back 20 years ago, 15 years ago?
Oh, easy. Yeah, they're a
Mhm.
lot better. Yeah, the dogs we've got right now, I think, are probably as good as dogs we've ever had.
Yeah.
And I've kind of Hunter likes to hunt the male dogs. I like the female dogs, and my brother Clint always had female dogs. But I think we got probably just about as good as dogs we've ever had right now.
Think so. You think and I just know this just from being around you and that you like some of these dogs could probably rival like Ike or old Sue Ellen.
Oh yeah, yep, yep, easy.
That's
Yeah, they're just the same caliber dogs.
that's what I wondered. So over, I mean, yeah, you've been hunting dogs well over, you know, your own dogs well over 40 years. Is there one over the years that just has kind of stuck out that was just probably one of like I mean, it's hard to say the best dog you've ever owned, but something like that.
Right. I've had 2 or 3 that are the top notch dogs, but I had a dog. Oh shoot, it's probably been, gosh, 30 years ago, maybe not quite 30, 25. But anyway, I called him Mooney. He went back to them running walkers that my dad had, them Charlie Tant dogs, and
Mhm.
he had a quarter Airedale in him, and
Okay.
some other stuff of ours. But gosh, this dog, we had litter pups, and we give one to a trapper down here, and it was this dog, and he really coarse haired, kind of had one of them heavy tails, But I had this black and tan female, big old long eared female, and he wanted to trade me, and I traded him. and he brought him up here and tied him up behind my house while he got loose. And them tent dogs, I don't know what it was about them, but they were kind of coyote. They
Yep.
were kind of a one-man dogs, and out of every litter still today, we get one or two that act that way.
Yep.
They're half wild. But anyway, he got loose here behind the house, and I finally had to set a coyote trap to catch him. And I didn't untie him for a long time. But me and Dad was up on the Dutton there riding one day, and he was like a 7, 8 month old pup, and we was riding down the backbone, and he threw his head in the air and took off the hill, and the other old dogs are still with us. And I thought, well, there's some elk down there. He's probably after them, and we kept riding. Then I heard him tree, and I thought, that dirty bugger, something's wrong. Something's not right. And I'll be danged, I went back. He had a big Tom lion tree. He'd winded that lion off that mountain as a big pup.
Jeez.
But that dog right there didn't have as good as nose as some of the other dogs. But if he could smell it, it was going to get caught.
Yep.
And that's just the way he was. And he was about 4 to 5 years old. I had him up on them Cougar projects with me, and he got to where he didn't like them other dogs.
Mm.
And so if he smelled a lion, he may go a half a mile before he even barked just to be away from the other dogs. And he'd
Wow.
catch them lions himself. But Clint had a bear hunter in, and so he was a good bear dog too. And I let him borrow him, and he took him, and he caught this big old bear on the ground, and that bear kind of hit him and split his shoulders apart, both of them. And anyway, it gave him nerve damage,
Oh.
and he never could walk normal, or run. He looked like he had paddled all the time. And 5 years old, and
Yeah. Right
he
in
was
his prime.
right in his prime, and he was a good dog. But anyway, I still caught lion with him. In fact, the second lion hunter seen when he was a little teeny kid, that dog caught him, and when he was crippled.
Yep.
So just had a lot of heart, and I don't know. He lived to be about 10 or 12, and ended up getting some bad cancer, and I had to put him down. But he was a good one. But you remember my old Ike dog?
Yep. Yeah, I got to hunt with Ike in his last couple of years.
Yep, and he was right at the top of the line. He was from just a teeny pup. You can tell them that are a little bit special, and he had it. I
Yep.
mean, there wasn't much training on him. He just went right to it. Had a good nose, good tree dog. Um, gosh, he was a good solid dog, and I raised some really nice pups out of him too.
Yep.
Uh, he lived to be about 14.
Yep. I can remember him. He was about as deaf as could be, but
Yeah, he couldn't hear you, but he'd still give her heck.
yep.
Yeah,
Because
but
yeah,
good dog and way good dog.
yeah. I think the first dog I ever got from you and Hunter was out of Ike. It was that Ike by Winnie.
Yep, yep.
So
Yeah,
well,
that was another good cross right there.
yeah, it was that would produce that trip dog of Hunters and a couple other ones, pretty nice dogs. That Addie dog that old Lance still runs, I think she might be the only one still left out of that, if I think right.
Cora, I
But
had Cora, and she was an
yep,
exceptional dog, and I never had a dog do that, but she twisted a gut and
yep,
blow. God, she was right in her prime too.
yeah, she was. I can remember when Hunter called me after that happened.
I've
But
got one up out of her, and I call Ruth. You know her.
yep,
She's an exceptional dog too. But I got some young ones right now, and in fact, gosh, one of them you give me back, out of Patty
mm-hmm,
and Saber,
yep,
and them dogs are unreal. I mean,
yeah,
she was a little slow starting. Her sister, uh, she was one of them that was one of them you just natural. But the one I got from you, man, she'd kind of stay with the mule all the time, but I don't know, something clicked this year, and she's outdoing all the other ones now. So,
yeah. Just she
Galdic,
sat there and took it in, and all of a sudden it all just hit.
yeah, we had a couple of long days of trailing here last week, and her, they're just big pups, and her old lips are just as raw as could be,
Yep.
you know, and that's good to see on them puppies.
Yeah. Well, definitely. Well, earlier you kind of mentioned it a little, and I wanted to talk about it because I'll learn just as much as anybody else. But you did them cougar studies for the better part of 17 years, and you did were were they all in Utah, or did you do some out of state too?
So most of them was here in Utah. Um, I spent a lot of time up. Well, right out of high school, I got on with Clint over here on the Boulder Mountain, and he had been doing that one, I think, for about 9 years. Um, Previous guy was Arnold Buttons, and I don't know how many years he had been there, but he ended up passing away, and so Clint was able to get on that project, and so I was in and out helping him. I was still in high school, but when I graduated out of high school, I got to work that last year it was open
Hmm.
with study, and so mainly we were just taking collars off of them
Okay.
um, there, and that was through the University of Wyoming. And then it's just a few years later, they started. They done two different ones. So they started one on the Monroe Mountain, and Clint was there. And then they wanted to try to do another site. So the Monroe was a hunted site. They wanted to do a non-hunted site, and so they worked to deal with Kennecott Copper and Camp Williams up north. And that was a year after, so it was 1998. I started on up there
Okay.
putting radios on lines on the Ochre Mountains.
And that was non-hunted. You were the only one that was allowed in there.
They didn't kill a lion there, and it was a cool place. It's nice to go lock a gate and you'd be the only one there. I mean, you weren't the only one there, but you're the only one hunting there. So,
Yep.
but it was a CWMU for elk and deer there also.
Okay.
It was that study was supposed to lasted 5 years, and I think we went 17 years on that project.
Wow.
And so I'd go up there usually after all the deer and elk hunts were done. Is usually the middle of November, December, and we'd stay till April till we got
Wow.
going in, and I'd done that for 17 winters up there.
Jeez. So were you catching every day, or was there regulations on what you could or couldn't do, or is it was just were you just putting new collars on, changing out batteries on old ones, or kind of what was it for sure?
So when we first started, we just trying to get as many radios out as we could, and kind of going in there blind. Like um, I started out on Camp Williams, and Camp Williams isn't a very big base. It's quite small. And then there's certain areas you can't go, and they don't want you in the impact area because there's stuff that hasn't exploded. And long story short, well, these dang lions like to walk right through that all the time. And Camp Williams is quite open, like a lot of open hillsides and oak, and there was some mine shafts on there, some culverts, and then back over a place they called Tickville and some of that country, there were some pinyon juniper trees. Um, but anyway, when I first looked at it, I thought, man, I don't know how this is gonna get wild. There's no trees here. But most of the lions that I caught there, we caught in culverts and mine shafts, or even under equipment. And then they had a training facility there that was like a center block, double-story center block house that had stairs going up. But I even had one on them stairs one day. But when I first went there, we was kind of didn't have everything lined out to go to Kennecott yet, so I spent most of my time there. And I think I collared that first year probably 4 or 5 lions right there on Camp Williams, which the deer would move in there heavy in the wintertime. And so them lions would just pull off them Ochre Mountains and come from the mountain down to the low stuff. And even, God, they'd even hang down there and cross Redwood Road and go
Wow.
down by the Jordan River and hang out too. And so they were crossing the highway. We had some run over on the highway there, but the first lion I caught on there, I caught her. She had 3 little kittens, and they treed the kittens, and we tattooed them. And then she went in a covert, and so it was a big old long covert, and I couldn't. It wasn't big enough to crawl in, but them dogs get in, and I wanted to collar her so bad. It was the first one there, and so I blocked her in that covert, and then I'd go sit there all day and see if she'd come out. She never would come out. So I had this dog. It's probably before I knew you. I called him Wrangler, a little black dog, and he wasn't black and tan, but he come black. But I sent him in there one day. I'd waited the second day. I thought she probably needs to get out of here, and I sent him in there, and he backed her up to where I could get a shot at her on one end of the covert, and I was able to get her tranquilized, and we put a radio on her. But that was the first one I done there. But Camp Williams had probably about 4 resident female lions right there. And
Wow.
then toms would just show up every once in a while. They wouldn't stay there just because it's so small, but they come in, check them females, and move on out. But it was quite a place. But once I got up to Kennecott, it was good. There were some
Yeah.
lions there. Gosh, I it was good. I had a film crew in there one day.
I think I've seen that. They have it on YouTube. You had some biologists with you. I remember watching that a long time ago.
I had a female. I wanted to change her collar, and anyway, I'd made a loop on the mule somewhere, and these guys were just sitting there videoing. I'll be danged, this female with the 3 kittens come down, and right behind her is a female with 2 kittens come down, right
Jeez.
together. Something you just don't never see anywhere, but up there. But them, but and you know as well as I do, like our country down here, we don't have a lot of deer and elk in right where we are right here. So these lions' home ranges down here are going to be so much bigger than the ones like up there. Them lions up there would overlap each other bad. I mean, them females, they'd be all over each other's territory all the time.
Yeah.
And but your toms, their home range is bigger.
So them lions where they were in a unhunted area, which I'm assuming if they leave they could have got chased and stuff, but did they act much different when you first come in there compared to the lions back home where they hadn't really been
Yeah,
chased too much?
they were. It was a whole different ball game. They weren't
That's what I
nearly
wondered.
as wild, as these lions around here. These lions here, dog, they're gone.
Yep.
Them lions just sit there and look at you.
Yeah, I wondered.
I trailed a lion up there one day at Kennecott. Same thing. Lots of oak, lots of small oak. But once you get higher on the mountain, you got some, fir trees and some aspens in places. But I trailed that lion out, and there's no snow. I couldn't tell what was there, but man, they dogs hit this oak patch, and there's 3 lions come flying out of there, all the same size, but his female and 2 big yearlings, with them, and I was able to get all 3 of them that day. But I mean, it's just things happened up there that don't happen anywhere else. But
Yep.
it was pretty cool to be able to go in there and hunt a unit that hadn't
Oh,
been, and
I can imagine.
there. But and they had really a good population of lion there, and they had plenty of game.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, you talk about, and everybody has their own opinion, and I don't know everything, but so when I first got up there, Kennecott was loaded with elk, a lot of elk. You didn't see a lot of deer, but there was elk everywhere. Well, they was having trouble with them getting on the train tracks and down on the interstate and getting run over, and so I'm thinking it was 98, 99. They went in and they built a big old fence line and some big corrals down just above Magna there. And in 2 years, they hauled out 500 head of elk and
Wow.
shipped them to Kentucky. And so that's where Kentucky got their elk. But anyway, slowly, the next few years, you start seeing an increase in the deer population.
Mhm.
And so that's one thing that I was able to see. You
Yeah,
know, and I don't know. Once the elk are gone, the deer seem to really do a lot better.
a lot
And
better.
and having a unit where they didn't kill a lion on it, for some reason that they had a healthy population of deer and
Yeah,
elk. So there's people hate lions; they want to see them all dead. But from what I've seen, it just and where they weren't killing any lions, everything seemed to be good on that mountain right there.
it was all thriving together.
Like I said, once they removed them elk, the deer population seemed to come back. At least I started seeing more deer.
Yeah,
And but you don't want to tell that to any of these sportsmen because they want the elk. They don't want to get rid of the elk, but they want
yep,
the deer. But they feel like if we kill all the lions, that the deer population's gonna thrive. And it's, in my opinion, it's not. It's There's so many factors into mule deer survival.
yeah,
All lions.
yep.
You drive up and down the highway. I drove to Cedar City the other day, and the mounted deer over Highway 20 killed. In one night. It just
Oh,
there's other
definitely,
play a factor in
for
mule deer.
sure. Yep. So on this study, you were collaring them. They were studying their movements and stuff, and I've got to see it a little, and Hunter's taught me a little. When I've helped you guys with some clients and stuff. But you with that, did you have biologists that came in and taught you, or to just kind of learn how to age these lions through their teeth and more info on that? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, so we had grad students that were with us all the time. They're supposed to be with us. They weren't with us all the time, but mainly from Clint is where I learned how to age lion.
Okay.
But when you get to see these kittens grow up, you can kind of each year, we may go in and change a collar so you can tell the difference in their teeth.
Yep.
But as normally at 2 years old, the cementum ridge starts to break through the gum line, and then it just slowly works down.
Okay.
Um, but gosh, you look at a lot of them, but like I said, when you get to see them when they're babies until some of them lines we got to see 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
And so you get to see their teeth, and it's, you know, how to age them. But
Yep. No,
most
that's
people just look at them and, throw out a number,
yeah, yeah. They look at the size and just guess.
kind of like a weight, too. You
Yep.
know, I've had the opportunity to, and it may just be where I've been, but and we weighed every single lion we caught, Clint and I both. And I only weighed one female lion that was a legit 100 pounds.
Wow.
Um, the average female was between 75 and 80 pounds. That's
And
a normal female
yeah,
weight.
and some of them females could have been 10 plus years old, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
still not breaking 100.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And, you hear a lot of people catching 120-pound females, but I've never seen one of them. But the same female, she was on Camp Williams, and she was just a big old stocky female lion. And one year she had two tom kittens, and I tattooed them when they was about 4 months old. I just put tattoos. 24 and 25 was their numbers. And Jesus, like 2 years later, I was up to Kennecott, and I hadn't seen either one of them. And I got on this nice tom track. Well, I catch him, and he's a pretty stout looking lion. And so I tranquilized him and got him out. And God, we always look in the ears because we tattoo everything.
Mhm.
And so I looked in there, and there's number 25. And
Wow.
he didn't go very far. He just went north probably, 15 miles. And so I put a radio on him. And I think it's like about 3 or 4 months later, I got a call from the grad student that was working with us. And he says, "Hey, this 24, what's your notes? This 24 line was killed down by Eureka," and it was his brother.
Mm-hmm.
So his brother went south and he went north. Well, this 25 line, I put just a regular VHF collar on him, and he stayed there for a couple more years. So we were some of the first to use these GPS collars.
Mm-hmm.
And these GPS collars that we had, they were the old school. You had to take them off and download them to get the information.
Okay.
So, but once we realized he was going to stay there, we thought, well, we better try this collar on him. And so we put that collar on him. But he, over the years, he lived to be about 7, I think. But he got to knowing the program pretty good. When he heard them dogs, he'd just lay there and wait for them. He'd never run. But he, second to last time I weighed him, he hit 200 pounds. I don't know if
Is
you ever seen that picture of me holding him.
It's the one down in the barn, right? Yeah, that is a big lion.
And he was the only Tom I've ever weighed 200 pounds. And,
Wow.
and when he just before he died, he got down to about 190. But we lost him. I'd always put a coyote collar on with them GPS collars because if they failed, we'd have a backup.
Yep.
And that old Tom, this Tom strictly ate elk
Mm.
and pretty much bulls. He liked them bulls. And it'd take him most of the time, he'd sit on a bull for 15 days, would take him to eat a bull elk.
Wow.
And, but he kind of lived in the higher country, but he'd make a loop in and out of there all the time. But almost every Tom that I collared in his area, he killed them. They didn't last. But anyway, I was telling you about, he disappeared and we couldn't find him for a year. And Dustin was the grad student up there with me and Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
He called me one day. They'd fly these lines about once a month just to get locations on them. And he said, "Hey, I finally found him." And so there's a place up there called Hercules where they make that rocket fuel.
Okay.
Them lines would always go in there. There's coverts there, but they always like to go in there and lay in them coverts. But anyway, he went in there and he was dead inside one of them coverts. And he just happened to hit him right with the airplane that day to get a signal on him. Because shooting straight down, you never could pick them lines up in them coverts. But he went in, got him out, and he downloaded the GPS collar. And there's 5 or 6 points right outside of the Hercules right there. And so he went out there and there's a dead elk. He had an elk killed, but I think that elk must have kicked him or damaged him or something that, you know, done
Yep.
something that he died.
Oh,
And
okay.
over, but golly, he was just a big old cool lion. And all the years he kind of hung on that unit, there never was a lot of kittens there. Um,
Mm.
when I first went there, we had a lot of kittens, but when he stayed there, made that his home range, I'm not sure he didn't put the hurt on them kittens. And
Yeah.
there was hardly any kittens while he was the resident Tom right there.
Oh, okay. So just he was probably putting a hurting on them, not letting them grow up. Copy. Well, that's yeah. I remember seeing that picture and Hunter telling me about it. I'd never heard the full story about it, but I've looked at that picture many a times. About every time I'm down to the farm.
Yeah,
So.
he was one of a kind, and he actually had another Tom kitten that was out of him up there, and he looked just like him.
Mm-hmm.
That bugger, he left the unit, got down there spent a little time on that lake mountain, down by Provo and that country, and I took his collar off down there, but he ended up getting harvested by somebody up
Yep.
there. He was going to be just like him, just a big old lion, just put together.
Yep. On all these ones that you collared, did you ever have one that just cut the country and cut a trail out of there? That just
We did, we did. In fact, there was there's one canyon up there. I always liked to ride it. Them lions would cross it all the time, and gosh, I'd made a big old loop in there that day. I was by myself, and so I'd park down on what the pipeline was, where they'd run that slurry stuff all the way to the refinery. And because there wasn't a lot of roads that went in that country. And so anyway, I'd made a loop up in there. And I was coming out. I was right down the sagebrush, and the sagebrush isn't only about 6 inches tall up there. And I was just, man, I could see my truck. And I looked over to the left there, and I thought, hey, that looks like a lion sitting right there. And it was. And I was right, no trees, no nothing, right where I was at. And the dogs were off to the other side, so I just kind of went way around that lion and got behind it, and then headed towards the canyon. There's some oak there. Well, they ended up running her down there and treeing her in an oak. And
Mm-hmm.
she's probably about a 2-year-old female. And I put a radio on her and thought, well, we had an older lion die out of there. And so I thought, well, maybe she's going to make this her home now. So, at any rate, she stayed there for a year. And so, well, we decided let's put a GPS on her. So we put a GPS on her, and we didn't put a coyote collar on her for some reason. And she stayed there the rest of the winter. And I come home, and we went back that next year, and we just couldn't find her.
Mm-hmm.
She's Something's happened to her. She's gone, and there's a lot of mine shafts and stuff up there, And I figured maybe something happened. She crawled in one, but I was driving home, and I can't remember what month it was, but Dave was a grad student there, David Stoner, and he calls me up and he says, "Guess what? Oh, I can't remember number 36 or something. She showed up in Colorado." I said, "Oh, baloney." I thought somebody must have killed her here and took her over there to call or tag her or something. But anyway, he said, "I'm going to go meet the biologist and pick up the collar, and I'll let you know what it is." And he got home. He says, "You'll never believe it." And so she left. I collared her on the north end of the Oakers, which had been right kind of by the Great Salt Lake.
Yep.
And when she left out of there, she kind of just took that whole mountain range and headed south. She made it almost to Richfield. And
Wow.
she got to Richfield, she crossed the interstate and took that mountain range and headed back north. And she went up through the Wasatch. She went clean up into Wyoming. She made a big old
Jeez.
loop in Wyoming and come back down and headed to Colorado. But I think she crossed that Green River 3 times in a
Wow.
trip, and she went like 800 and something miles in 3 months.
Wow.
And so, but these lions they're showing up in other states now, where there's no
Yep.
lion. So
Yep.
they are moving. We had when I helped Clint over on the Boulder, we had a female that had 2 tom kittens and a female kitten, and we tattooed them. Um, the next year they left. The female kitten stayed. She made her home on the Boulder. Them 2 tom kittens, both one went east, one went west. One was killed in Colorado, and one was killed over here by Zion.
Wow.
So they go looking for a home range, and I always thought maybe them toms would be more apt to travel more, but and I think this BYU study they had a female that ended up almost over into close to Denver or somewhere. It seemed like.
Yeah, they did. They had one. She got whacked over there. I think I heard she was just outside of Denver.
Yep.
Well, and that's like I think. Yeah, I was. It was with you and Hunter. Remember that day we caught that old female that had a collar on it that we figured was probably one of the last ones that Clint collared,
Yeah, that lion there had to be at least 16 years old.
which was old. I mean, she took a wrong turn that day. That day was a little. We weren't ready for it. She went down to the sagebrush flats.
We was on the Boulder and she headed back to the Monroe, didn't she?
Yeah.
She about made it, but she picked the only tree out there to tree in. It wasn't very big, but
Oh no,
that was something to see her though.
it
I'd
was.
what happened to her, but
Yep. Yeah. I mean that. I mean that collar on her when we started talking after we had caught her and all that, and you figured it was one of the last ones Clint had, and that she was that old. That's pretty amazing for one to live that long, for
yeah,
sure.
and that's one thing about them lions on that Ochre Mountain. On the side I was on, they had a chance to get old.
Yep.
And one of the first lions I collared up there, I think she died at what I guessed her age, but I think she was pushing 15 years old.
Jeez.
And her collar had quit. I just figured she's dead in the mine shaft somewhere. But I happened to run one in a mine shaft one day, and my battery's getting low, Dustin.
Oh, you're all right.
Anyway, I made me this trap from one of these barrels that you catch bears with, and these
Mm-hmm.
barrel traps.
Yep.
And I I went and rigged it up to where I could put me a little device inside, and I could like a little trap, like these little box traps.
Yep.
And so when I'd put them up them mine shafts or them culverts, and I'd catch them lions. So I
Mm-hmm.
went and set it at that mine shaft, and I come back the next morning, and I had her, and so I just tranquilized her, and I pulled her out, and there's that old female she'd been gone, her collar had quit, but she just reeked of skunk. I mean, she
Oof.
just smelled like a skunk, but I pulled her out, and all her teeth were right to the gum line. I got a lot of pictures of them, but you just touch them, and she was out, and she
Yep.
just cringe,
Because it
and
was hitting
her teeth
nerves.
were in bad shape, and man, she crossed the highway uh, over into Magna there, down there. Kind of got some little fenced off area, kind of some wetlands, and she stayed there for a few days, and she ended up dying right there. But
Yep.
I figured her to be 15, maybe
Jeez.
16 years old. And
That's an
Clint
old lion.
Clint did have one down on the Monroe that made it that long too.
Wow.
I don't know how she did, because they'd put the hurt on them down there, but it's something to see them when they can live that long.
Yeah, when they have the chance, for
Yeah,
sure. You definitely don't see the age in them teeth like you used to, for sure. When you're looking at pictures of teeth and stuff like that when they're in the tree.
we had
But
I collared another Tom up there one year, and he stayed for a little while, but he ended up heading down. And gosh, the old professor from Utah State University calls me. He says, "Hey, you may ought to get up here next few days." He says that lion's laying right down on the Utah Lake down there. But
mm-hmm.
anyway, they was worried about him being around them houses and stuff. But he'd gone all the way down from the Okers all the way down to Camp Williams, and went down and crossed, and kind of followed the lake across. And then he ended up to Sundance ski
Oh,
resort.
really?
And he lived there for a couple of years before he was harvested. But,
Yep.
and I think that's they find a pathway, to cross. And the same on the Stansbury side. There's a couple spots where there's kind of some little hills and trees, and that seemed to be the path they'd take to cross from one mountain range to the other one.
Yep. With the studies and all of that stuff, and then obviously you've been outfitting for most of your life as well. Did you start the outfitter kind of after you quit the studies, or did you just kind of do all that in between?
You know, I my dad he was an outfitter, and then he kind of give it up. And Clint started in pretty heavy, but right out of high school, I just kind of done my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Clint and I would help each other,
Yep.
but so as soon as I graduated high school, I started taking hunters,
Okay.
and so I've been taking hunters, a few years before I did start on these uh, projects. And I don't know, I since projects I ain't taken as many hunters.
Yep.
Um, Personally, you kind of get a little different feeling after you deal with these lions this long. Uh, I'd rather just see them live another day.
Yep.
But you do what you got to do. But and to this day, we take 3 or 4 guys a year is all.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew
And
you weren't.
the way Utah is now, and all their new
Yep.
laws, it's hard to find an adult lion. Um,
Definitely.
and you don't find. I mean, gosh, I used to could catch a line or two right behind my house here all the time, and this Ponsagot, and they've put the hurt on it, with the trapping and everything else. These old lions ain't got a shot, but we
Yeah.
got plenty
Well,
of deer
that's
here for them to eat. But
yep. Well, that's like that lion we trailed the other day when I was up there. That was probably about as nice as lion as you'll see nowadays. You
I
caught him
know,
the day before.
Yeah, and then we couldn't get the guy there to get him. So anyway, hopefully he lives another year. It's
I think so.
pretty wild. We uh, we started this line. I don't know what time we started him, Dustin. Probably about 9 or 10 in the morning.
Yeah, I think it was just after 10.
I think we'd rode 10 miles on the mules, and he got off some ledges on us. And long story short, he got over there and some nasty stuff.
Oh,
And Hunter headed over there, and Dustin took our Hunter with him, and bless old Dustin's heart, he gets us out of some predicaments because I'm scared of height. I don't like heights, and Hunter don't either. I don't think, but we ended up with dogs on ledges overnight,
we did.
and so we went and got some repellent stuff, and old Dustin he bailed off, thank goodness, and got the one dog, and Hunter was able to rope the other one. So
Yep,
it was
yeah,
quite
that
a day,
worked
wasn't it?
out. It was, and I figured once we all three of us headed up there, I knew who was going off because I was the smallest, and so I knew you and me weren't going to be able to hold Hunter up.
I know it. He'd still be there. So
But
that's not the first time you've had to go off, is it, Dustin?
no, it's not. Me and Hunter that day we had them dogs go off that rim over to Sand
Sand
Creek.
Creek.
Yeah, we watched that old that Missy dog of Hunter's. We got there just in time after them dogs had trailed off, and we knew they were treed, but we got there just in time, and we could see the dogs off the rim treed, but Missy was still above it. And finally, she'd had enough. She backed up and just she Superman and went off like a 40-foot drop, hit the bottom, rolled, and went right to treeing. And me and Hunter were just like, I don't know how we're gonna get these dogs out of here. And then she bailed and went down into Sand Creek all the way. And finally, the dogs, we were able to tone them all off, but we couldn't get them out. We didn't have ropes that day, so
Right.
we had to come back the next day, and Hunter had to lower me down while I got dogs and shoved dogs up to him. So we've had some adventures for sure.
Oh man. Yeah, I hate them. I hate them ledges.
Yep.
And Clint he'd go off. We've lowered him off quite a few, but you're not getting me off there.
No, I didn't hear you volunteering the other day. That's
I
for
was there.
sure.
I had that rope around my waist holding you.
Yep, you did. Oh,
But
well, over all the years you've been hunting, and it's probably a loaded question, is there one hunt that just kind of like one day of trailing or one day a line you caught that just stands out all over the rest that you're like, damn, that was a good day.
yeah, you have a lot of them days, really. But gosh, I remember. Oh, it's probably been about 13 years ago, maybe. I had a guy in here from Alaska, and I cut a road just behind the house here and cut this tom track, and so I don't know where Hunter was, but I ended up calling Hunter. He wanted to come, so we put on that line probably about she's 8:30 in the morning, and it was spring, no snow, and all day long, and right before dark, about this time, they got him jumped and got him caught. But just a day that you can sit behind and watch them dogs work, and we got to be with them most of the time until they jumped it. But that was a that was a pretty cool hunt right there. But like I
Yeah.
said, there's so many of them, and sometimes I have to be driving somewhere to remember what it was. But
Yep.
I've had
Well, it's
a lot of
you
good
know like
hunts, and
like we were talking the other day when we trailed that tom. It was that day was worth it just to watch the good dog work that we got to sit there because we were able to stay with them most of the time until they dropped off that rim.
yeah,
And shit, they were trailing it better in the dirt than they were the snow that day, just
I
because it had
know it.
walked on top of that hard
That
snow and then it
frozen
started.
snow. Yeah,
Yep.
once the snow hits that, where they walked, it seems like that sand just
Yep.
disappears.
Yeah, when they walk on top of it and that sun comes out. But I mean, God, we trailed. I mean, me and Hunter didn't walk out of there till dark. So we
Oh
trailed
yeah,
that lion for
yeah.
by the time they caught him and he jumped again, and I stayed with the dogs and went farther. The hell, I think we were on him for 10 hours before they caught him
Oh,
again.
easy. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
long day.
Oh, and then when we got the dogs out the next morning, me and Hunter were ready to go again, and you told us we couldn't go.
Nope, I'm
we
not
were good.
going.
We were gonna send them again.
And they were all my dogs. They looked pretty good there, but it took them about 3 or 4 days to recover after that deal
Oh,
before they could walk again.
I'll bet that was a long day through some. I mean that rim country off that side's pretty nasty.
That's ugly. It's flat ugly.
It is
But
for sure. Well, McLean, I appreciate it. I mean, I've heard some of these stories before, but I learned as much as I think anybody will just talking about them studies and that. And I had, but like one thing I wanted to get real quick, on that Blood Origins video, Lionheart, one of the best quotes of that whole movie was yours, and it says, "You never truly," and I'm probably gonna misquote it, but you never truly know anything about a lion until you follow one for a week.
yep, and I
You
believe
know,
that's old Ben Lilly, and it's true.
and
You got all these guys now that think they know everything, but and I'm not. Like I said, I don't know everything, but I've been fortunate enough to be able to work on these projects, and you get to see things that most people don't, and especially when you follow your dogs.
well,
You're going
definitely,
to see stuff. You get to man. I hate to go on another story, but
you're
um,
good.
right here above town one day, Clint cut above town on a fresh snow, and he said, "Hey, there's a line across the road up here." So we went and put on it. We just had some puppies, and so I started walking with them puppies. But anyway, they were long gone. But I walked up on the hill and I could see where that old lion had set on his butt as a female. And then it took like one big old jump, and then it was dragging something, but I couldn't see no other tracks around there. And I followed it down the hill, and it caught a dang coyote and had it and killed it and ate it right there.
Jeez.
So again, when you get to follow your dogs and go out, technology, and I'm just speaking for myself, has changed
Yeah.
hunting. Period. A lot of these guys just sit there and watch the Garmin. You know how I am. I want to be with the dogs.
Yep.
I can't run it anyway. So, um, golly, you just miss out on a lot of cool stuff.
But you
Um,
do, and like I said, I had hunted dogs for probably like 9 years before I met Hunter up to the ranch and got to come down and start going with you guys, and I learned probably that first year I moved down there when I had my dogs at your place and I come and hunted just about every weekend. I learned more in the 3 or 4 months of hunting lions with you guys about every weekend than I did in the first 8 years because we followed the dogs,
right.
and you guys have hunted that country your whole life. You know it really well. But like, I mean, I'd be riding up a canyon and you and Hunter would be like, well, if we go here, them lions cross here. And if not, if there's a tom in here, he's going to hit this canyon and he's probably going to scratch under this ponderosa. You'd send me down a canyon with dogs and say, hey, check these ponderosas. And if nothing's here, go up here. And it was just the knowledge that you have of how them lions move in your country and just the way they move in general from you following them so for so many years helped me just tremendously to be able to go read some country and be like, well, if this lion's traveling this way, he's probably going to cross in a saddle like this, or he's going to hit a side canyon with these good ponderosas or things like that. And stuff like that's just, if you're not out following the dogs and seeing it like you do, it's not stuff you're going to learn.
Yeah, and you take these dogs out riding like we do, and I had a friend of mine from Tennessee here. He knew David, you
Yep.
know, back during the banquet, but um, these dogs figure these places these lines cross. We'd be riding up a canyon and you'd look over and there'd be a dog 200 yards going to check that tree
Yep.
just because they know that tree right over there is one that, they may cross. And them dogs pick up on all that stuff. They know you know, where to look for them big trees like them lions do.
Yep. That's one thing I remember about that old race dog of Hunters is that dog was pretty dang smart when it come to checking where them lions were and picking up some big loses that way.
Yeah. He was a heck of a dog. His old dad was even just a little better, you know.
Yep.
I told you that story, what happened to him, didn't I?
Roni.
Roni, yeah.
Yep.
I had a guy in hunting from Salt Lake. We was over in some of that Pine Creek country, but ledgier stuff, and we got on a line. I didn't know what it was. Dogs are struck below us, and they end up jumping it pretty quick. It ended up being a female, but they caught her in this big old pretty dead tree, and so we just going to take a picture. And I just as I got off, she bailed, and she headed off in this stair step ledgy canyon. Well, they get down there in their tree till I get there, and it's one of them leaning trees,
Oh,
and every dog's in the tree. And you know how them dogs are. Once they see you, they get a little braver and they want to. So anyway, I tied the mules up and was trying to hurry and get them caught. Well, he headed up and that old lion hit him and knocked him out of the tree. And it's probably about 30 feet, but there was like an old stump right there, and it had like a root that was sticking up, that was like needle sharp,
yep.
and that dog lit upside down on that uh,
Oof.
root, and he was just impaled right there. And I told that guy, I said, he's gonna be dead in a minute. And I picked him up off that root, and I laid him down because I just knew he was gonna kill or dead right there.
Yep.
Well, that little bugger turned, and next thing I know, he's heading up the tree again. And I had that kid, that hunter of mine, catch him, and it's quite a hole, and he was
Yep.
bleeding fair. And so that guy had one of them tight shirts on, and he took it off, and we put it over that dog. And then I took my wild rag and I tied it around him, and it went through him right by his front shoulder right there. And I got on the mule and he handed him up to me, and it's about a 2.5 hour ride out of there. Every step that old mule took, he just whining.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to the truck, and gosh, I got him loaded up, and we hurried home. I called every vet. They were all in some conference somewhere. I could not get a vet. And so I got him in the bathtub right there, and I washed him up, and I think I put about 60 stitches in him, but it went right along his rib cage and missed all these vitals.
Wow.
And
Just
he laid in the house there, and old Hunter, he was all shook up. Hunter's just a little kid then. That was his dog. And he slept there on the floor with him. And he didn't move much for about 2 days. And then about third day, he got up and started climbing Marily's cabinet. So she kicked him out. And I caught a line with him a week later.
wow.
And just, these dogs are so tough.
Yep.
And
They
they
are.
big hearts. And it's, I'd like to have a bunch like him.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I noticed when I first started coming down to now is some of these dogs, especially what you're breeding now, are definitely a lot smaller than they used to be.
A lot
Because
smaller.
yeah, and is that just because it happened, or are you finding that? And I think, I mean, I probably already know the answer, but these smaller dogs, you think they last a little longer?
I do. I
Yeah.
think they last a lot longer, and I think these little females do too.
Yep.
Um, Hunters, like I said, he likes the male dogs, but I just think they're lighter on their feet, and I think they live longer, hunt
Yeah.
longer.
Yep. Well, that's. I was curious. I mean, because when I first started hunting, I mean, that's back when you had like old Ike and old Junior and
They were
that
big
that
dogs.
big that
They
that big red Barney dog, and I mean,
Yep,
they were some big dogs
they
back
were way
then
big. Yep, for
for
sure.
sure. And
But
then it
no,
just
I like these smaller dogs.
yep.
You can fit more in your dog box too.
That's exactly right. Hell, I ain't even seen you use a dog box very often.
uh, Heck
We
yeah,
used to just put them up in the gooseneck of the trailer.
I know it. I know it. Yeah,
Oh,
you get more people going there. You got to pull a horse trailer, but
yep,
I can fit about 8 in the truck here in the
yeah,
rack. But
yeah, in your stock rack.
yeah,
Well, good. Is there anything else you want to get out while you can?
no, I appreciate you doing this, Dustin. Like I said, I don't know everything, but I've had the opportunity to learn more.
Oh,
So, and
you
it's
have, and
every day out's a new learning experience, and it's just enjoyable. I love these dogs. I love the nothing I enjoy better than sitting on a good meal watching the dogs work.
yep. Well,
Um,
that's
and like you said, your kids and grandkids. I just hope things go the way that our kids will be able to, and your
to
kids
enjoy
will
it.
be able to enjoy what we have. It's been a
Yep.
big part of our life. I can tell you that, and uh, Man, I can't imagine I'd be out with the dogs.
No, I agree. You know, I mean, that's like you've seen me go camping and tote them kids everywhere trying to get them into
You've
trees, and
you've been a good dad, I can tell you that for sure.
they enjoy it. They enjoy it quite a bit, and every time they know I'm going to Tropic, it's, well, I get phone calls at night. What did you catch? What did you trail? You know, what, like when I come up this last time, I got a call. Well, was Boomer there? You know, they were asking questions. What dogs did Hunter have? And it's just,
Oh yeah,
they, you know, they enjoy it too.
they're great
So,
kids. Yeah, you've raised them right for sure.
you know, I don't know if it was all me, that's for sure, but I think just like Hunter, Marilee had a little bit to do with it.
Yeah, probably more than me. He said we shouldn't have never named him Hunter. It ruined him. I said,
Oh,
well, he's a lot better doing what he's doing than other things he could be doing. So
yeah,
you know,
there, like you say, there's just some people that have it and some that don't, and I think he's had it ever since he was little,
oh yeah,
especially since, you know, I've heard them stories of old Stan coming and sneaking him out of school and taking him hunting.
yeah. I'd get a phone call when I was on that study, and Hunter's not in school. I said, where is he? Well, he said his grandpa needed him. Well, his
Oh,
grandpa cut a line track and have to come and get him out of school to go with him.
oh, you know, well, that probably didn't help him none either, but
No,
that's
but
all right.
it was good.
Yep, for sure. Well, I think we'll end her there, McLean. I
Okay.
appreciate everything and appreciate you giving me your time. That's probably more words than you've spoken in a long time, I bet.
I usually don't talk this much, but we're
It was
we're
good.
it's busy time of year, so it's all good.
Yep. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Hound Talk podcast with the Cold Strike crew. If you like what we're doing, like, subscribe, give us a review. It means a lot to us. Thank you for your support. Now go load them dogs and take the kid hunting.